Hey everyone, it's Pastor Paul Krampitz, and I'm so glad that you're joining us for this little walk through Luther's Small Catechism. I hope that you're finding it interesting. I've got to admit that I've always loved the Catechism. I had the great privilege of taking a course, an entire semester at seminary with Tim Wengert, the preeminent Luther scholar of his time, and editor not only of this little study edition of Luther's Small Catechism that I'm referring to, but also of the Book of Concord. Well, we get into a very interesting commandment today, the sixth commandment. So probably something that will raise some questions, and if it does, I'd be happy to hear from you and we can talk about it more. So let's just dive into this. The sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. What is this? By now you can guess how the explanation is going to begin. We are to fear and love God so that we lead pure and decent lives in word and deed, and each of us loves and honors his or her spouse. This is the commandment that confirmation students often get a little squirmy in, a little uncomfortable talking about matters having to do with sexuality and marriage. So you shall not commit adultery. Again, the first point, is that how we are in relationship with one another says something about our relationship with God. Because all persons are created in God's image, and we ought to see that image of God in them. So this is about how we treat our spouses, our significant others. Luther says that we are to lead pure and decent lives in word and deed. So that implies that it's possible to commit adultery, to violate this commandment, not only with physical acts, but with words, by how we speak. And famously, Jimmy Carter talked about committing adultery but if you have lust in your heart. So it's also our thoughts that we need to attend to. And the point here is that we love and honor our spouse. Christians understand that our spouse and the gift of Christian marriage is indeed a gift. It comes from God. And like all gifts from God, we spoke about God's name as being a gift. We ought to recognize that it's something special and that we ought to care for and cherish and nurture. And so while, yes, having an affair outside of marriage is committing adultery, I would also suggest that the use of pornography, the impure thoughts that we might have for someone else, lusting after others, people other than our wives or husbands, is also committing adultery. There are lots of ways that we can lead impure and indecent lives in word and deed. Now, here's the thing. Like all of these commandments, we are all going to fall short. These are what we ought to do, what God would have us do, not necessarily what we can do. I don't know that there's a person alive that's never had an impure thought, that has not found themselves looking at someone, not their spouse, with lust in their heart, that we have not in some ways failed to love and honor our spouses as we should. The good news is that this is what God's vision for our life should be. God understands that we will fall short of this, and there is also grace and forgiveness. Again, in the order of Luther's catechism, we move from the law, these commandments, to the prescription in the creed, and then into getting that prescription filled. The diagnosis, here is our sin. What we need is God's grace, and then we get that grace in the prayers and in the sacraments. So the commandments aren't supposed to beat us up. They're sort of like mirrors that we hold up, and through the mirror of the law, the Ten Commandments, we see that we are sinful people in need of God's grace. And in fact, God drives us to Christ when we realize just how much we need forgiveness, each and every one of us. So, you shall not commit adultery. One of the Ten Commandments, of course, an important one. And they're all important, but again, they are all just variations on that first commandment about how we relate to God. You shall have no other gods. And when God truly is God in our life, then the spouse that God has given us is one that we will love and honor, and that we will be moved to lead pure and decent lives in both our words and our deeds. Until next time, this is Pastor Paul saying goodbye and God bless.